Good morning. I'm Mercy, and I'm continuing from the GRASP P and moving to intersecting issues, climate change, gender, and development. This is a quick outline, a bit for us to reflect on some environmental change from the global perspective, and also then zooming into Ghana, work that was done concerning the smallholder farmer, which I term the environmental manager. How well have we been involving them in our decision making? And a bit of the early career researchers' support in responding to these changes and potential areas for research consideration. I'm a little bit biased because most of the information are coming from the national DSA. But what is environmental change? And we know that this is not new, and that is the reason why we are here. Laura and team and the UEA and JIC are calling us here because there's a change. And that change can be positive or negative. Unfortunately, we are seeing most of the time the negative effects than the positive, and it is a concern for you and I and the entire population. This change, you could see I was trying to look at the possibility of what change. Which one is beautiful? Is this the green? We all want green, or is it the brown? And often we are seeing this. So the change are also being influenced by human beings. So a little input from work done by the National Research Council 1995. More than a decade now, we have this emerging on the topic emerging needs and opportunities for human factors research. It brings out some issues for us probably to reflect on as we are trying to find solutions or responses to environmental change. And key of the dimensions of the problems are increased concentration, which definitely leading to the greenhouse gases and climate change, which has now become the major environmental issue now. If you touch on climate change, then you have fans. Deforestation, as with a forestry background, is also a major concern because we have to clear also for agriculture. And just like Cathy said, we have to think of food security. And as a result, forests are taken away. Water pollution, sanitation, and more specifically in developing countries, abuse of agrochemicals. Because day by day, we want to clear the land and we are tired of using the hoe and the cutlasses, so we go into the use of agrochemical. Acid rain, emergence of invasive species, and loss of arable lands, etc. The list is so. Then how do we deal with them? This is coming from a NRC document. We have the direct behavioral changes. Yes, legislations are being developed day by day, incentives given, education is also part, but they're saying it is not enough. Because yes, we have to change people's behavior. People have to sometimes appeal to their moral responsibility, but there is the need for changing technology. So now we see, don't go into a fossil fuel, move into wind, solar, and the rest. So they are calling for environmentally friendly technology, energy production and use in terms of efficiency versus the waste, improving the public transportation system. Do we go as a group or we go as individual? And how much are we consuming? Substituting resource light for resource heavy technology, electronic substitute for paper. When Ghana decided to go into paperless at the port, people thought it's not possible. How can you do paperless? But one would have thought that probably paperless could have increased our revenue. Unfortunately, 2018 revenue from the ports did not match. So what is really happening? So human factor plays a role. Recycling and waste handling are some of these ways and means that the National Research Councils are calling us now because of the changes that we are experiencing in the environment. So how do these environmental managers, the smallholder farmer, in Ghana, in Malawi, in Kenya, Ethiopia, elsewhere, what are their perception of this environmental changes? In 2019, I was fortunate to be part of the ACU, that is the Association of Commonwealth Universities, support to African Academy of Sciences. They had a program called the Climate Impact Program in a term called CIRCLE. So I was part of it, and then this funding was to give early career researchers the opportunity to lead a research in climate change. And I chose to work within the domain, the interface between agriculture and forests, as well as linking it with gender and climate change. So the study was carried out in about 12 communities, but basically this is focusing on three communities which are rain-fed, and rain-fed agriculture is the most common practices in Africa. So this study was carried out. It started to focus to explore the impact of the climate change on smallholder farmers in Ghana from a gender and socio-economic perspective, and trying to get understanding of how these smallholder farmers are coping with the changes or the effects of climate change, at the same time maintaining their livelihoods to sustain the land. And how do these socio-economic factors influence their ability to cope, adapt, and recover? It wasn't surprising to see the approaches used was more participatory in nature, and as a gender, to get a gender disaggregated data, to try to do focus group and put the men and women in different groups to look at their views and their perception, and using what I call the flip sheet and the maize. So it's not surprising to have the beans and the rice. So it's an approach also that was used, and I combined it with survey. What were some of the compounding issues and how some of the strategies that these smallholder farmers were coming out with? Yes, climate is indeed changing, and it's no news to the smallholder farmer. Temperature, especially the study was carried in a transition zone. In terms of vegetation, Ghana is divided into 3 zones. We have the high forest zone where rain is constant and then we have the middle belt or the transition zone where it has a blend of a mixture of a high forest, of a conducive rainfall pattern, and then a bit of savanna. So in those who have been in Ghana, the northern part of Ghana is more in the savanna area. So this is a community which are in between, which has a regular rainfall, but unfortunately with changes in the climate, all these were changing. So the savanna has started mimicking the characteristics in terms of weather of the transition has started mimicking the characteristics of the savanna, and this is what. But unfortunately, majority of the smallholder farmers, especially the men, do not have a adaptation strategy. So the constant issue is we are the mercy of the weather. So we just have to put our plant, the seed in the soil and leave it to God, because they don't have any thing to do with it. But interestingly, the women have ways of dealing with their crops, especially when marketing is not favorable. So you see this young woman here is processing what we call gari in Ghana. Normally it's a milled cassava. You mill it, you extract the water from it, it gets dried, and you roast and become a powder. And you can preserve it for a very long time. We call the student survival meal, because that is what every student in Ghana, you have to take it with shito or a hot pepper to the secondary school, or sometimes to the university. So it's the home survival meal. Or this is called, the one is also the cassava, cut it to pieces, peeled off, and then you dry it. Later you mill it, and then it's called kukunte. That's the local name. It also can be preserved for a very long time. So this is what the women rather doing, while the men will fold their arms and said, we wait for a favorable weather. Besides the climate changes which is occurring and the effect on their crops, they are being confronted with socio-economic factors. Factors such as poor road network hindered access to healthcare. So as much as crop yields suffered due to high costs of agricultural input, crop pests and diseases, lack of irrigation facilities. So probably we are fortunate when the government decision of one district, one dam. Probably it will help us to establish an irrigation system in some part of the country. So, and the households are struggling with unreliable electricity, supplies, poor health facility, inadequate drinking water. So when these farmers were asked to rank, which is the priority in terms of need to address, climate change is an issue, but nobody ranked them. Both the men and women, it wasn't something they needed solution. They needed solution to these things. The healthcare, despite the fact that climate is a major issue affecting their farming system. So how do we then bring in, so I'll go back to it, but how do we bring in early career researcher in responding to this? Basically, any career researchers, and I'm happy I have some PhD students here, when you are almost going in, you said, I need a job. When you need a job, you have expectation, a lot of expectation to publish quickly, to do research, to get grants. Is it so easy? Then there's pressure from the university, you publish or you perish. So how do we go about it? So early career researcher needs mentorship. Mentorship, so that seasoned researchers willing to mentor, but the question is the early career researcher also allowing himself or herself to be mentored? So that is also a major question. Fortunately, through the support from Circle Uptake, from ACU grant of institutional strengthening, my university, we have now established the pairing of mentor and mentees, which is started. I just advertised before coming here, and I've seen interest from the young early career researchers applying for this mentorship program. I'll leave more mentorship because that is where Asmai would touch more with her experience with award. Regular professional development, like the purpose roadmap, which will be mentioned. The RDF, I know RDF is common in UK because it's from Vita. I learned from RDF from Vita, an award program, supported with small grant, like the Circle. There should be small, early career researcher does not need a huge amount of money. Prof. Kathy mentioned the 1 point, we may not even know how to use it. We just want a small token of the thousands of the dollars to keep us, to do research. We need to acquire they need to acquire the skills to communicate. And our communication of our research is not only for scientific, but also to the non-scientific community. Those people we took, the environmental managers we took data from, how do we involve them in our outcome of our research or output? We have to also, that is the terminology of our award we've all enjoyed, networking and visibility. Prior to our award, I thought visibility was bragging. That was my mentality. Then I realized that the little thing you do, let people know it, and there may be some people who may learn from it. What are then the few areas as we are here to deliberate on? Yes, EC is indeed complex. Complexity of EC does not allow one discipline to champion it. Because the moment you try to address it as a forester, the biologists will come in and say you did it wrong. The agriculturalist will come and say you didn't pay attention to food nutrition, and then you are in trouble. So it means that we need to engage the environmental managers, please, the farmers and practitioners in addressing. We don't engage them only when we are doing implementation. At the conceptualization and co-creation of knowledge level, we need to let them. We need to pay attention to the multiple and the complex socioeconomic factors, just like the farmers are asking. Yes, climate is change, but that is not our priority. Our priority are the basic necessity. that we need. We need to make a conscious effort of mentoring program in some of the projects we do, and also engage in best agriculture practices, efficient use of agrochemicals, especially coming from developing country like Ghana. And then we reflect on some of the potential areas that has been provided by the NRC document. On this note, I say thank you very much.